Hi, welcome to Midweek Church, the first ever official meeting of Midweek Church. We're going to be exploring today our first theme. We've got 3 sessions over the next 3 months running into September. The first of these sessions is going to be looking at how we listen to God. How can we hear God, particularly in the context of working in a busy office, in the context of having a high pressure job, in the context of a work-life balance, perhaps with family. I want to start by taking you to a place where I was yesterday. I was in Manchester in Piccadilly Gardens. I was walking through Piccadilly Gardens and there's this guy singing, really good looking guy, sort of well dressed, quite tall, looked a little bit like me to be honest, but he had dreadlocks. Anyway, this guy's singing songs about God, songs about God's love, songs about how God is perfect, songs about how God has a perfect plan for our life. Really beautiful words that he was singing. And there's this one lady and she's listening absolutely intently. Her ear is kind of lent in. I was watching her responding to these words that he was saying. Really fascinating to see her being impacted by those words. The problem is she was the only one who was listening. There was about 70 people there, all kind of bustling about. Some could see him, some could hear him, some didn't even know he was there. But this whole crowd of people actually were just ignoring this guy as he was singing these wonderful, wonderful words. And I thought, well, that's actually a picture of how we're kind of designed these days. We're designed, aren't we, to filter out information. Information comes at us from all angles. You might be watching this clip in an office or at home because it's come up on a link on Facebook or a link on Twitter. Maybe you can imagine walking through town and seeing billboards and seeing advertising hoardings. Maybe you think about watching the telly and adverts come on everywhere, subliminal advertising. You watch a film on YouTube and there's an advert before it. You turn the radio on, because that's probably the first thing you do when you get in your car, and there's adverts. Everywhere we look and turn, there's people trying to turn our own heads, trying to get us to think about their product or what they want to tell us. Even at work, there's huge distractions as the increased pressure of the financial climate affects businesses. More meetings to go to, harder targets to reach, more training to do, more hours to be fitted in to a working day. Everywhere there's distractions that prevent us from listening and hearing from God. A famous Premiership manager recently said that the problem with the Premiership is it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can always, no matter what time of day, no matter what day, you can always find someone on the radio or on the telly who's talking about it. You can always log on to the internet and have a discussion about something to do with football. And the problem with the world, I guess, is at the moment that there's so many distractions that can turn us away from finding out, from hearing from God. So I guess the question is not so much, does God speak today, but are we ever going to be able to hear him amongst the hustle and bustle and madness, I guess, of the world that we live in? There's a great story in the Bible. It's found in the book of Samuel about a young man called Samuel. His mother was Hannah. She promised Samuel to the church when she was barren and she could have no children. So she promised God that she would give this child, if God would bless her with one, to the church. Samuel, this young boy, is growing up and kind of living in this church temple area with a man called Eli who sort of looks after him, and I guess he's like the vicar of today. Samuel it says, grows up in the presence of God. One night he's lying in bed and he hears this voice and it says, Samuel, Samuel. And he wakes up immediately and he goes to see Eli and he says, Master, you called? And he said, no, I didn't, just go back to bed. Again, this voice wakes him up and Samuel, Samuel. And he runs into Eli and Eli just says, no, it wasn't me, go back to bed. A third time this happens, Samuel, Samuel, and he runs into Eli and says, yes, Master. And the Bible says that Eli perceived that God was speaking to him. So Eli says to him, well, you just go back into your room and you say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Samuel didn't hear what God had to say to start with. He couldn't discern his voice immediately. He was a young boy. He wasn't experienced in a relationship, what we might call a relationship with God or anything. But with a bit of guidance, with a bit of a word from his kind of religious leader, this person who was mentoring him, he soon heard what God's voice sounded like. He soon began to discern it. The Bible tells us that Samuel, the Lord was with him, that none of his words fell to the ground. Samuel became this really powerful guy, actually, who appointed kings. Samuel was a really, really important, significant, spiritual person in the Bible. And why did he get there? He got there because he was able to listen. There was a point when he couldn't listen, but then there was a point when he could. And the great sentence that Samuel repeats, that Eli has asked him to say, is, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Might be a really simple introduction to Midweek Church, but that's one of the key prayers that I've got for Midweek Church, that it might be this place that in the hustle and bustle where we perhaps might never have heard God's voice before, or we haven't heard it for a long time, right in the centre of the week, that we might hear God's voice. There might be a place where we can turn away from the work, we can turn away from the business, turn away from Facebook and Twitter and all those things, and just give God some space, give God a place for us to hear him and for us to respond with those words, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." So the question is, who are you in that scene that I painted for us at the start? Are you a member of the crowd who's kind of walking past this guy, who's either ignoring him or seeing him but deciding he's not for them, or seeing him but thinking, actually, I've got to be somewhere, I've not got time for this? Are you part of that crowd who's distracted by the distractions that the world gives us? Or are you that lady, perhaps just as busy, perhaps with just as many things to do, but just in that moment, in the middle of her day actually, just leaning in, just wanting to find out if there was one or two things that she could glean, just trying to find out if there was something that God might be trying to speak or say to her through that moment. So it's my prayer that together, through Midweek Church, we might all begin to invite God more and more into our week, and perhaps into our work as well.